so much, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, let me thank organizers of this colloquium for the kind invitation, and let me thank you for your presence here. I'm always very happy to share my current research with young people, because I think you should be the next in this direction. So, I'm Alexey Zaikin, and I'm professor in the Department of Mathematics, but in fact I have a very special appointment, because part of my appointment is in mathematics and part of my appointment is in the Institute for Women's Health, which means that I cooperate very closely with clinicians and with biologists. In fact, this will change, so from September I will be completely on mass, but of course after 20 years of cooperation I will continue this cooperation. So as far as I have heard, in this colloquium, many of you have heard talks about pure mathematics. Here, in contrast to this, we will speak about applied mathematics based on my experience. And in fact, it will be so much applied that in some countries, this science, namely cybernetics or theory of system science, is classified in physics. And in fact, by background, I'm a physicist and not a mathematician. So this would be a very applied mathematics. And in fact, in my research, I have two directions. One direction is modeling, mathematical modeling, and that's what we will speak about today. We will speak about modeling of intelligence, emergence, this popular word, emergence of intelligence in complex biological networks. And another my direction is data science. So I'm trying to develop new architectures of artificial intelligence for data science. So today we will speak about modeling, and the aim of my talk is to review what I'm doing. So that's why I will go relatively fast through very different topics, not going into the details, mainly speaking about concepts. So we will discuss conceptual approach, but please do not hesitate to interrupt me during the talk, because if something is unclear, it would be much better. So let us make it informal. Simply ask the question, and I will try to answer it. So we will speak today about intelligence. Of course, it's a very hot topic now, because everybody has seen this absolutely unprecedented progress of artificial large language models. And of course, the question may arise, do we still need to learn to study mathematics if in fact ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, or DeepSeek can answer all your questions? Well, first of all, godfathers of AI tell us that yes, math and physics, so this is citation of Zaikin, math and physics matter more than coding. In fact, we have seen some cognitive change. For example, Andrew Karpathy from OpenAI was writing that cognitive change happened between this November and December last year, because in November he was programming 80%, and I was helping with 20% of programming, and in December it was inverse. For me, situation, cognitive change appeared maybe between February and March, because in February, if I needed to simulate something, I needed to find student, postdoc, or PhD student to do this. Now I can do everything by myself. But still, mathematics and physics, so this applied mathematics is really, really important, because transformers, so the bodies of large language models, are not so energetically efficient, not so computationally efficient, so people try to find new architectures. Mathematics is important inside the neural networks, and another point is that very soon large language models will use all the information available in internet, so we will need something else in order to do the next step. On the other hand, our biological intelligence, what that all of us have in our brain, is very, very effective, because it's very, very effective energetically. It's more effective than, for example, ChatGPT or these large language models. It's more effective as generalized AI, so very popular word now, because we have really general intelligence. What is interesting is that we have 10 trillion cells in our body. Yeah? Inside each cell, we have 20,000 genes. If you multiply these numbers, you will get approximately 60 trillion parameters. This is the information capacity of our single body. In contrast to this, ChatGPT is using just 5 trillion. So 60,000 against 5 trillion. We are still informationally much more complicated than any available AI. Today we will speak about intelligence, and here is a slide just to draw your attention. So what's the difference between a student and the washing machine? I was showing this slide many years, maybe more than 15 years. Initially, a student was for me a symbol of intelligence, and washing machine not, because it's just a functional device. It's analyze input and provide you some output. I have got very funny comments to this slide. Some Italian professor told me that actually his observation is that washing machines and computers inside sometimes are more intelligent than his students. Anyway, but students are probably conscious. This was just a joke. We will speak today about intelligence and consciousness, but not in philosophical way. Intelligence will be for us just ability, artificial intelligence, will be like artificial intelligence, just ability to classify inputs and learn, and consciousness will be just from the point of view of some mathematical theories. So it's not a philosophical consciousness, what we do not know. On the other hand, and in biological systems, we definitely have, in some biological systems, like our brain, we definitely have intelligence. But this intelligence is embedded, another very popular word, in this triangle, because it's embedded in our brain that have multi-layers, so very interesting topology, very interesting architecture. And the question, of course, why? So how emergence of intelligence is linked to this particular architecture? It's linked to consciousness. We definitely feel ourselves, so we have self-awareness. So it's not like ChatGPT, I think, at the moment doesn't have consciousness. And we have a lot of noise. We have a lot of noise in the surrounding, we have a lot of noise inside because of thermal fluctuation. Everything is very noisy. And still, it works. So we will discuss how intelligence is linked to multi-layer architectures, to consciousness, and to noise. And in that, even I will show you a very recent chart that I have got. In fact, how could we consider the dependence between consciousness versus intelligence? Yeah, so this will be some interactive points. Very simplified scheme, biologists will kill me for the scheme, of our brain looks like the following. We have a very complicated network, take here, chairs here, go here, network of neurons. We have 86 billions of neurons. They have very complete, each neuron can have up to 10,000 connections, synapses. So it's a very complicated network. What is interesting that it can have very long range connections. So the tail of the neuron can connect it, in fact, across the whole brain. Over top of these neurons, or let us say overlapped, we have approximately the same number of glial cells. They can be of 4 different types. The most important are called astrocytes. And these astrocytes, every time when one neuron is connecting to another, not every time, but in many times, it can be mediated by the astrocyte. So inside the astrocyte, we can have some event, it's called calcium event. And if calcium event covers connection between these two neurons, something happened. So it regulates, adjusts this connection. So these two networks are linked in some way, bidirectionally. We have a link from neurons to astrocytes and from astrocytes to neurons. These two networks operate on a very different time scales because neurons are relatively fast, astrocytes are relatively slow. This calcium event can take several minutes, whereas the duration of the pulse in the neuron is 10⁻³ of the second. So time scales are uncomparable. Moreover, inside each cell, we have a genetic network. So we have genes, 20,000 genes, it's some sequence on our DNA, and these genes are linked in a network because a gene, even if you don't know biology, it's enough to know that a gene is producing a protein, and the main working horse of all cells, and these proteins can regulate another gene. So one gene can activate another gene or suppress it, inhibit. And it's called transcriptional regulation of genes. So it's really a network. So it's a really, really complicated network, and it's a multi-layer architecture. The question would be, of course, why evolutionarily do we need such a multi-layer architecture, and where is actually intelligence? Is it in neurons, in astrocytes, or on the genetic level? That's why some time ago I was interested, could we construct artificial intelligence? So I'm speaking about artificial intelligence, not based on the connection between cells, how it's linked, how it's organized in neurons, but inside each cell. This can be, because inside each cell we have also a very complicated network. And a group of people, so here in fact I just joined other scientists, were interested in the question, and I mostly like the following example. It's example about associative learning. It's some paradigm of artificial intelligence, basically known in the link to famous Pavlov's dog. Idea is very simple. If Pavlov's dog, if the dog sees a sausage or meat, it starts to salivate. If it hears the ring, no reaction. If he applies this to stimuli simultaneously, it learns association between two stimuli, and then it's enough just to ring. And the dog is expecting some food. Can we realize this? In fact, it's a very simple associative artificial intelligence. Could we realize this associative intelligence inside the cell? Was a work 2008, Professor Rowe from Birmingham, and he has shown that in fact just using 3 genes we can construct such a synthetic perceptron. Why I'm saying construct? Because nowadays with tools of synthetic biology we can not only study available genetic networks, we can really connect them with so-called CRISP technology. I don't want to go too much into the biological details. You can really connect genes synthetically to perform some elaborated function. How it works approximately? It has 2 modules, one responsible for the meat, one for the bell. Stimuli are repressing the repressor, but the difference is that it's slightly asymmetric. For meat, it has some production of the protein without this activation, whereas for bell, it does not. And then what happens that if we apply the meat stimuli, so at some amount of these molecules, we have the output, expression of this protein, which can be linked to the fluorescence, so you can visually see the fluorescence from the cell. So it reacts to the meat. If you apply the bell, no reaction, because if it represses the repressor, the gene will be free, but there is no so-called basal expression. So free, it's not producing a protein. But if we apply them simultaneously, of course we have a very strong reaction. But then it's enough if you apply just the bell, you are also getting the reaction. So the system learned association between 2 stimuli. One is based actually on the memory of this protein. So there is concentration, some produced, and when it's free, it starts to activate, even without basal activation. But of course, this protein concentration decreases exponentially because proteins are degrading. So this association, this intelligence worked just for some time, and then it forgets the stage. So you see, in each cell of our 10 trillion cells, we have 20,000 genes. Just with 3, you can organize associative learning. And in fact, we and also others, we published a lot of papers and suggested a lot of schemes. It was perceptron like in proper transformers, summating 2 stimuli, another scheme of associative perceptron, perceptron with proper learning, perceptron based on the transfer learning between teacher cell and student. And in UCL, Professor Chris Barnes actually is implementing such biocomputation experimentally. So if you want to work in collaboration with that people, there is a Professor Chris Barnes, and in fact I have had a student, 2-year student in Bellevue, and she made a mathematical modeling for this nature communication paper. So very talented student. So now it's not without doubts, intelligence can be organized inside the cell. And of course then the question appears if just on the level of genetic connections we can organize intelligence. Why evolutionarily we needed neurons with electrochemical signals, I think answer is the speed, because genetic intelligence is based on the diffusion, and inside the cell this diffusion is pretty quick, almost instantaneous. That's what we discussed in my year 3 course, which was called Biomathematics. Now it will be called Mathematical Modeling and Quantitative Physiology. But if you consider transport of molecules between cells, it's no more, it's simply too slow. For example, if I open here a perfume, you will hear it maybe after a second. So it's not immediate, despite the fact that the speed of molecules in this room, 1.5 kilometers per second. It's extremely fast. Why? Because we have all other molecules, and the perfume molecule has to diffuse. So it just goes from a hit, from punch to punch, from the collision to collision. It's very slow. So probably evolutionary, it was possible to organize intelligence on the genetic level, but then it was not possible to make it quick, and there was no evolutionary advantage, and multicellular organism developed electrochemical signals, which gave rise to appearance of neurons. That's about genetic intelligence. You remember that in brain we have genes inside each cells, we have neurons, and then we have astrocytes. What about astrocytes? I will not go into the details, just to explain you the principle. So we have shown that in principle, 20 years ago when I was starting my research in this area, people believe that astrocytes are just helping neurons. Neurons are some special cells like bosses. They need food, they need removal of the garbage, and astrocytes were performing these functions. Nowadays we know that astrocytes are taking active role in the processing of information. Why? Because they provide a local integration. So we have connections between neurons, but if you have a calcium event inside the astrocyte network, inside this calcium event, connections are adjusted. They're integrated because we have a joint connection. It's like attention. If you are interested in artificial eye, it's like local attention, appearing and then disappearing. So very complete. It's adding the complexity to the system. And we have shown that astrocyte, for example, can organize temporal working memory. So we used a mathematical model of neural network coupled to model of astrocytic network and investigated how it reacts to some input patterns. So astrocyte can be responsible for working memory, or more recent work for 2023 is responsible for situation-based neuromorphic memory. Idea is the following. If I want, for example, to recognize Tatiana, and I meet her in Paris, I will not recognize her because I was not expecting to meet her in Paris. But if I meet her here, I just meet a part of her image and I recognize it. And this system of recognition is organized by this temporal integration, namely by astrocytes. So I will not go into the details because it will require this separate talk. But look, in the brain we have genes inside each cell, inside the neuron, inside the astrocytes. We have actually neurons that are definitely responsible for intelligence. We have on top of it astrocytes. It looks like intelligence is everywhere. And that's why now biologists started to speak about brain milieu, so or voxel of the brain. So they are no more investigating just connections between neurons. They are investigating the whole part of the brain, because it looks like that everything in the brain is generating, responsible for the emergence of our intelligence. But some parts probably are quicker, some are not so fast. That was about connection between intelligence and this very special architecture of the brain. What about consciousness? Of course, nobody knows what is consciousness, namely this feeling of self-awareness, but there were some progress. And I have asked ChatGPT to plot knowledge graph, so connection between three theories that I like the most. It's a theory of integrated information, we will speak in more detail about, is a theory of global workspace theory. Free energy principle or inferred theory of inference theory of consciousness is developed by Carl Friston. He's a very famous neuroscientist here in UCL. Roughly speaking, so in global work theory, consciousness means that we have a theater, for example me, and I'm presenting here, but and we all are brain, but consciousness appear because now I'm presenting something. So this presentation is our consciousness. When, for example, you will start to ask some question, then the consciousness will move to you. So it's an act of presentation, or let us say broadcasting of information. Free energy principle or inference theory means that consciousness is minimization of a surprise. Biologically, we didn't like surprises because you are going through the jungles and you meet some predator, you have to escape. So we needed some system to anticipate the future and minimize what we predict and what will happen. And this process of a comparison between our imagination, predicted world, and the real world is actually our consciousness. That's what Carl Friston more or less is inferring. Also based on free energy principle. He believes that brains are optimizing the energy. I don't completely agree with this, but I mean, look for the references. Integrated information theory. Here I will speak a little bit more in more detail. Was developed by Giulio Tononi. First papers appears 20 years ago. In fact, he was a student of. Question?
Actually, could you remind us what your definition of consciousness was?
Feeling of self-awareness. But okay. Point is that all these three theories define consciousness in a different way. Here we will discuss global work. It's a broadcasting of information. It's anticipation of information. Here, what I will repeat many times, a system is producing more information as a whole than any sum of its parts. That's the idea of integrated information. So, coming back to your question, in all the theories, consciousness is defined in a different way. In fact, there is no formalized definition of consciousness, but definitely it exists. We feel self-aware. We have a self-awareness. Open question. Next Nobel Prize probably will be yours if you contribute to this point. Integrated information. So Giulio Tononi, neuroscientist from US, he was in fact a student of Nobel laureate Edelman. And what is interesting is that Edelman has got Nobel Prize for the immune system. But what is the immune system? Immune system is some system to identify whether some part of our body belongs to us or not, or it's a parasite. So it's a kind of identification. And another point is interesting that neurons are using the same receptors as immune cells. Nobody knows why. Probably just evolutionary. These receptors were available, and evolution have constructed something, neurons. And Giulio Tononi and Edelman, in fact, they developed this theory that started to be developed maybe 20 years ago. And the main idea was that integrated information quantifies the extent to which a system generates more information than the sum of its parts. Better to say than any sum of these parts, because if you just consider some partition, it's very easy to find a situation where the system as a whole generates more information. But as a whole, it generates more information than any sum of its parts. Doesn't matter how you split the system, the whole generates more information. That's definition of integrated information. And then it's more speculation that conscious systems generate positive integrated information. That's the basis of integrated information theory. Details. What is actually integrated information? It's based on entropy. What is entropy? Entropy is uncertainty. For example, if you toss a coin, entropy is two possible outcomes. If you roll the die, uncertainty is six possible outcomes. So in principle, information is either 2 or 6. But then people wanted that the sum of the system, if you simultaneously toss the coin and roll the die, will be sum of informations, but not a multiplication. And sum of possible outcomes is 2 multiplied by 6, 12. Yeah? That's why people suggested logarithm, because logarithm of multiplication is equal to sum of logarithms. If you use logarithm instead of the uncertainty itself, then summating uncertainty will be sum of uncertainties, right? First step. Then people wanted to use not the uncertainty, but average uncertainty, because here all outcomes are equiprobable, singular, in the sense of uncertainty, but generally it's not the case. Sometimes, for example, your coin can be not fair, and head will be more probable than tail, or in reality, all, of course, different possible outcomes have different probability. That's why it was important to estimate average uncertainty. And here we just notice that number of outcomes is 1 over the probability of this outcome. So logarithm of n is logarithm of 1 over pi. We are getting minus if we just use logarithm of the probability. And to average, we take just the sum of this outcome, which is uncertainty, so logarithm of pi, multiplied by the probability of this outcome. It's a typical formula to consider the average, right? So we are getting minus sum of pi logarithm of pi. This quantity is called Shannon entropy. It's average uncertainty inside the system. Or Shannon uses to quantify the informational capacity of the channel. So how much information can you transmit through the channel? You can estimate using the Shannon entropy. Based on Shannon entropy, people suggested mutual information. What it is? If you have 2 events, x and y, which are somehow connected, for example, we have the same system, so our group of people, now and in 10 minutes. Yeah? So something will change, uncertainty will change. Then we can compute Shannon entropy of x, Shannon entropy of y. We can compute conditional entropy. It will be uncertainty of x under the condition that we know y. Or if you consider the time in this direction, better to say uncertainty in y under the condition of x, under the condition that we know x. So this is the actual uncertainty in y. And will be something else, which will be, so to say, transmitted through between events x and y. It's absolutely symmetric. So we cannot say the time goes to the right or it goes to the left. So uncertainty of the event, if you have another event, it's conditional uncertainty plus something depending on x and y. This something is called mutual information. Strictly speaking, it's the uncertainty minus conditional Shannon entropy, average uncertainty. So it's Shannon entropy. That's how people define mutual information. Very interesting measure. And biologists like this measure. They are computing mutual information between different events. And what Anoni suggested is that we will encode, for example, suppose we have just 3 neurons. Yeah? We will encode it V0 if it's quiet, as V1 if it's producing a spike. So we are getting 3 informational channels. This is our system. So that's our system. It has just 3 variables defining its state. It's transition in time. And then we consider some subpartition. For example, just first channel I, A, and second channel, and 2 other channels, subpartition B. Then we can consider this mutual information inside A, mutual information inside B, and mutual information of the system as a whole. And that takes the difference. Mutual information of the system as a whole minus some what was transferred in terms of the information within A and within B, right? So it will be, so to say, how much the system as a whole is adding to the mutual information in comparison to the sum of these 2 subpartitions. This was called effective information. And then we will consider all possible subpartitions. Of course, for 3 channels there are not so many combinations, but it grows exponentially. If you have relatively a lot of informational channels, a number of combinations will be tremendous. And among all effective informations, you will take the minimum. This minimum is called integrated information. Obviously, if minimum is positive, it means that all other effective informations are also positive. So if you say that in the system, integrated information is minimum, it means that for all possible subpartitions, the system as a whole generates more information than some of its subpartitions. So there is something global. But it can't be completely random, because if everything is random, integrated information is equal to 0. So this should be, and I will show you some visualization, it should be something to have integrated information positive between complete disorder and complete order. Complete order will be full synchronization. For example, if you have 0 everywhere, so all informational channels are in 0, or 1 everywhere. Yeah? So very interesting measure, using simultaneously integration and differentiation. How Tanoni was actually selling this theory. The theory received both broad criticism and support. Just to show you some titles from Nature or Nature Neuroscience, so very high-ranking journal. So this was initial paper by Tanoni 2016. 2023, consciousness theory slumped as pseudoscience, sparking uproar. 2025, what makes a theory of consciousness unscientific? Response to this, a science of consciousness beyond pseudoscience and pseudo-consciousness. Written by Anil Seth, it's professor from Sussex University, and he's developing in UK. So he's mostly developing this theory of integrated information. I like this a lot, because this means it's a very hot topic and people are truly interested in this topic. You see, there is a lot of hype. Personally, I think this was because initially journalists thought that integrated information is really explaining consciousness. It's not explaining consciousness, it's just some measure for the complex system. And it's not so simple, because first of all, it's very difficult to compute it, because combinatorial complexity grows exponentially. So with my old laptops, I could compute it just for 8 informational channels. In brain, we have 86 billions of neurons. Yeah? So we can't compute it for the whole brain. So proxy measures have been proposed by Seth, his student Barrett, and Atsumi. People managed to show in this paper that integrated information is different. So suppose you have somebody lying in coma, and very important question, should we switch off machines providing life to this person or not? No response, but we can measure, for example, EEG, so some signals from the system, and compute integrated information. In this paper, they have shown that integrated information can discriminate between different levels of consciousness in wakeful, sleeping, dreaming versus non-dreaming, even anesthetized, and comatose patients. So very speculative measure. It's precisely defined, so I find there is no pseudoscience, because definition is clear. It's not clear how it's linked to the consciousness, because nobody knows at the moment there's consciousness. At the moment, as a whole, for the whole brain, people manage just to compute for this nice animal, Canerhabidis elegans, that have just 300 neurons, and connectome is fully known. So using supercomputer, some clusters, you can compute it just for this person, but at the moment not for the human brain. What was interesting for me, since there was some measure, to investigate again, in brain we have neurons and astrocytes. Why evolutionarily it was necessary to have so complexity, neurons and astrocytes. So we decided to take very simple model of neurons, connected randomly on or all-to-all, overlapped with astrocytes, take the best models available. It's a Hodgkin-Huxley model for the neuron. I don't have time go into the detail, but you can easily Google. Main idea is that everything in the neuron is based on ion channels. So if you have some stimuli, then ion channels are opened, ions are transmitting charge, and the neuron is producing some response if you are over some threshold. Best model for astrocyte, appearance of this calcium event, we connected all, and we have got that increasing the coupling between neurons and astrocytes, you may increase generation of integrated information. Of course, it's shown not for the real brain. I mean, of course, I don't want to speculate too much, I like speculations. It's just for these best models of the neuron and astrocyte. But it gives us some insights that probably, we have shown it numerically, for all-to-all connections, mathematical theory have been developed, so it's analytical result, not computational. But what is interesting that we are getting, we could speculate that probably evolutionary astrocytes were added by the evolution to the neurons because it was easier to generate consciousness, because integrated information is probably linked to consciousness. I think that's the only scientifically sound result in this investigation, but I personally find it very interesting. This was published 2019, and then my PhD student here in UCL, that's by the way visualization. Just 6 neurons, time goes from bottom to top, and you see it's not completely synchronized, not completely desynchronized. So they synchronize here, for example, here almost complete synchronization, and then desynchronized. It's some meta regime between full synchronization and full desynchronization. If you are between, maybe you are conscious. Or Luis Abrega, he was PhD student here, then moved to industry. That's another visualization. Also, neurons time goes from left to right, and we see desynchronization, then sometimes synchronization based to the synchronization in astrocytes, desynchronization, synchronization, some interesting effect. And then we have considered genetic networks and have shown for this very complicated, slightly, in fact not very complicated, just inside each cell we have 3 genes, but all these cells tries to be desynchronized. So dynamical regime seems to be very complicated because the whole system, it's like we will all try to applause, but every person will try to applause in antiphase with the neighbors. Of course, dynamics will be very complicated. Sometimes we all will be synchronized, sometimes some clusters appears, you will be synchronized between inside your group, you inside group, and then it will change always. So exactly such a complexity that we need for generating integrated information. And we have shown that on the genetic level, positive integrated information can be generated. Again, why consciousness didn't appear on the genetic level? I think complexity was enough, or maybe not, but at least it was enough for integrated information. Maybe not enough for the proper consciousness, but it was too slow, because everything based on the diffusion, simply too slow. We needed neurons for fast communication. Okay, what about noise? Everything, so I will, let me speak just several minutes more. I will basically show you pictures. Everything in biology is very noisy. So on the genetic level, gene expression is very noisy because of thermal fluctuations. And even now when I'm speaking, noise from the ventilator or I don't know, some system providing noise to the order of my voice signal. However, in many systems, noise can generate order. Experiments have been made. For example, fish detecting plankton, we add electric noise by 2 electrodes, fish is eating more planktons. We are stating on vibrating platform and deviate from the verticality. If we add some random vibrations to the platform, we deviate less, noise-induced order. Or we put a screen to the nose and send periodic light in one eye and noisy light into the another eye. For optimal amount of this noise, brain better detect periodic light. Or a group of people answer what will be 7 multiplied by 8, 5 multiplied by 6, when you just retrieve information from the memory without thinking. And in the presence of acoustic noise from type recorder, is changing volume, for optimal amount of noise, people started to answer such questions quicker. That's why probably we don't like complete quietness, and for example, children or students prefer to hear music while doing homeworks. We need some level of noise, biologically. I spent a lot of time investigating what can be the role of noise. I will just, to have some time for discussion, I will just show you some slides to illustrate. First of all, coming back to this associative intelligence, we have shown that this noise, we can extend the memory when the system remembers association between two stimuli. Or in model of neurons, what we have done, so here it's a mathematical simulation of mathematical models of coupled neurons, between argument models. It's 2,600 by 2,600 neurons. In each neuron, we have randomness, completely uncorrelated. And then here, and the system is in oscillatory regime, each element, they're coupled. And since they're coupled, without noise, the system starts to oscillate. With noise, oscillations are suppressed, but if we excited additionally, I excited here, you cannot see, and here, with noise, so this is with noise, this is without noise. Look what will happen. With noise, information starts to propagate. Without noise, oscillations are killing it. Mechanism is relatively complicated. I don't have time to go into the details, because noise and coupling move the system from oscillatory state to excitatory one. So it changes the noise is multiplicative, it changes the nuclides. So here oscillations are suppressed. So here not suppressed, the system is oscillating and it kills initial information, initial signal. Here oscillations are suppressed and information start to propagate. Very interesting effect. Based on the noise, changing the state of the system. So it started to propagate. It was our work 20 years ago. And then I was thinking, if we can make noise, if noise can make the system starting to propagate some signal, can we speak about noise-induced artificial intelligence? Can we base intelligence if we switch on the noise? So can we, in principle, get the system? We have the system. We require it to provide some intelligence without noise. It's not intelligence. We increase noise. It starts to be intelligent. Our paper by my PhD student here in UCL 4 years ago, what we have shown that based on this noise-reduced excitation, if you have a system of neurons and astrocytes and apply some input, for example, pattern of one corrupted by some noise, then this internal noise, without noise, the system oscillates and it's not responding to the input. With noise, it starts to recognize these patterns. So the system can first learn, for example, 1, 0, 2, and recognize this pattern. But this recognition happens only if I switch on noise, which is in all these elements completely uncorrelated. It's uncorrelated between elements and it's uncorrelated in time. So it's pure randomness. So this I find very surprising. I add randomness and the system starts to be intelligent. That was. Sorry, my YouTube started in Safari. No idea why. Yeah. I play sometime computational games, look videos about. Okay, this was possible only with astrocytes. And then, of course, so noise can induce intelligence. Can noise induce consciousness? Recent paper, just published this year by my postdoc Zaikin, who was also my PhD, we have shown that changing the noise, we can get generation of integrated information. So maybe noise can even generate consciousness. Right now, it's work in progress. I'm working on simple systems to compare in the same systems intelligence and consciousness. Of course, consciousness in terms of integrated information. It's some measure that we developed to measure consciousness. It's not the real consciousness. Intelligence, I use some measures which are trying to classify the ability of the system to work as a classifier. It's called intrinsic separability dimension. And I have got some non-monotonous dependence. I find this very interesting because if you increase intelligence, after some point, the system becomes less conscious. Maybe LLM or my laptop is more intelligent, because it definitely can compute faster, but it's less conscious. Maybe people with Asperger syndrome, so autism, they are more intelligent, as Sheldon, for example, this famous person in Big Bang serials, but he's less conscious. All speculations, very open questions, that's what I'm doing now. Today we have discussed intelligence in this triangle between multi-layer architectures, consciousness, and noise. And my aim was just to review this research and to show that everything is linked, sometimes in very complicated manner. And of course, there are a lot of open questions. For example, which AI architecture is used in this architecture? Because now, when we know how transformers are working, with this self-attention, cross-attention, and encoders, decoders, and so on, of course, people try to find these structures in real brain. So the question is, how much do we use these newly developed AI architectures? Absolutely open questions. Question is to measure intelligence. If you can measure just some signals from the system. For example, you measure use heartbeat, your EEG, maybe some impulses with all the genetics. Can we measure intellectome? Or can we measure consciousome? Everything are open questions. Okay, thank you very much. Some references. I think we have 10 minutes for discussion, so thank you very much. Please do ask questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.